So our first speaker today is the military director of the AMRDEC in Huntsville. AMRDEC is a critical partner of ours, somebody that we have been working very closely with. And we are fortunate enough to have Lieutenant Colonel John Schmitt.
Hey, good morning. How's everybody? Good. So I like to start off kind of most talks by just kind of forcing a little bit of ease to the awkwardness. If everybody stand up and in the vein of this collaboration and conversation, but just stand up and introduce yourself to somebody you haven't met before, or somebody you haven't seen in a couple years, or something. Good to see you. How are you? Okay, thank you so much. Now, good talk. Enjoy your day. Drinks are at 5. So I like to kind of start that off because I think what this community is doing right here is incredibly special. There's no such thing as a bad conversation, and especially with how much is at stake and how volatile the world is today, and not only with our adversaries, but also with the economic and funding profiles that we're expecting in the next few years. The conversations and the leveraging of resources and relationships is even more important than it probably ever has been. So let me start off by this. So I got to share this. So I was talking to my daughter this morning, and she goes, "Dad, are you ready for your talk?" I said, "Yeah, I'm so excited." And she goes, "What are you going to talk about?" I said, "I'm going to talk about defense manufacturing." And she just kind of, I can hear her eating her cereal, and she's like, "Huh." And I'm like, "What?" She's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "No, I'm talking about, it's kind of the topic." Well, it's not the topic I would have chosen. And if it gets boring, at least you can talk about helicopter stuff. So hopefully I won't have to digress and tell any war stories. So with that, so I know it's probably not even your first cup of coffee, and I'm already talking about acronyms. That's what we do, right, in the Army. So the Aviation Missile Research Development Engineering Center is where I hang my hat right now. And what I just wanted to kind of share, just to give you a lens of from where I'm coming from. I'm an acquisition professional for the most part, and I've worked in project management and PEO aviation, and I came over to the S&T side just about a year ago, and have been fortunate enough to serve as the military deputy director at AMRDEC. So the Aviation Missile Research Development Engineering Center is, we with our partners in industry and academia, we develop, design, and deliver capability across both the missile and the aviation portfolios. But what I like to point out, and I think it's important, just kind of the lens that you're coming from, is that if you think about what it takes to put a missile into the air or an aviation system into the air, it's a lot of technology, right? I mean, we're talking radar, data links, structures, precision navigation and timing, warheads, energetics, so on and so on. And we have all that engineering expertise resident in Huntsville, Alabama, and we heavily leverage our industry partners and academia to help us reach our mission. What it also means is that we also have a lot of customers outside of aviation and missile that we can apply that technology to. And so we're always looking for opportunities to do that more efficiently and at the bleeding edge of technology. And before we kick off, I'd like to personally just say thank you and to all you aspiring professionals in this industry. Thank you. I mean, the nation rests in your hands, and I appreciate you all. I mean, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up, so it's really inspiring to see these folks, passionate about something so young in life, and thank you all. I appreciate you. So the focus of this summit is innovation, and I think it's important to understand where we're going. We have to know where we've been, and I think we have to take a lens of kind of the history of the United States, in modern warfare specifically, as it comes to manufacturing. So pre-World War II, we had an isolationist national strategy, and we really didn't want to get involved in that war. Germany had invested enormous amounts of its GDP towards science and technology, and they were incredibly successful. By 1942, they were making synthetic gasoline, synthetic rubber. They had industrialized the Haber process, which now is the keystone process that feeds the world. They had incredible advances in both materials and energetics and rocketry. We went toe-to-toe with the Panzer, but it took us three per. The way we won that war was not through technology, it was through manufacturing, it was through this community, and we did it through quality and through mass. And it takes an incredible amount of energy and resource to mobilize entire society to meet that. And I think it's important to recognize manufacturing's role in the war. Now, coming out of that war, Operation Paperclip and a couple other things, we decided to take advantage of this technology. And we said, wow, we didn't realize how far behind we really were. We're talking 20, 30 years behind what the Germans were able to do. And we said, as a nation, hey, we're going to bring together academia, industry, and government together, and we're never going to let this happen again. We are going to maintain the technological edge as long as we can, because clearly this is important. The loss of blood and treasure is too great to not maintain the technological edge. And I think academia and industry does this very well. And I think in the last 13 years of sustained combat, we've been so focused on just getting product out to the field that we may have lost this a little bit, at least on the government side. I think those conversations that are crucial and important in addressing the elephants in the room of intellectual property and profit and government creeping requirements. I mean, we have to be better at truly teaming through conversation. And I think this doesn't have to come with money, right? This can just be sharing and leveraging of technology, sharing and leveraging of facilities and resources and people, and we can, bring in interns from across the three, and with dwindling resources, this is going to be ever more important. And I think we have to kind of go back and look back at our history and recognize how we did that and find new and innovative and creative ways to leverage each other's resources going forward. The next couple things I think we can do in the near term, these aren't awe-inspiring. In fact, I almost hate to bring them up because they're talked about so much, but I want to bring them out of the laminated bullet statement. I want to have a conversation about it because the affordability conversation is crushing us, right? I mean, we are not delivering full weapon systems because of the O&S costs on the backside. We are unable to adopt new technology because the cost of maintaining and fielding our current systems is just too great. And where y'all can help us, and this community can help us with that, is to keep maintainability in mind. I mean, we've most of our systems are legacy, and we're overhauling and upgrading and adjust them, to meet current needs. But for the most part, they were never designed with maintainability in mind. So for every bloody knuckle that happens is a failure of some design trait early on. And every minute that we have to change a torque or grab a non-standard tooling or whatever to maintain our equipment is a moment that we have to take this asset out of the field from the commander to do the nation's business. And every time that they do that, there's a dollar associated with that, both in operational readiness, but also in supervisory stuff and everything else down the chain, manpower that it takes to maintain this equipment. And if we can get ahead of some of that, at least some of it, just a fraction of it, we need to do it deliberately to drive down that O&S cost so that we can adopt technology more readily, so we can afford to transition things more readily. On the same note, we have to consider repairability in mind, right? I mean, the Gordian knot of some of our legacy systems is suffocating, right? I mean, to unlock the box you have to unlock the whole thing, right? We have gotten away, or we are slowly moving towards the idea of modularity and open system architecture and all that, and that's incredibly important. Please don't hesitate to find new and innovative ways to get there, because we have to be able to repair our systems as we find ourselves in these forced entry situations around the world, we don't have the luxury of established supply lines and whatnot. We need to be able to repair them as far forward as possible. And I know a lot of that is design early on. But as we adopt new methods of designing for manufacturing, I beg you to consider the modularity and the open system architecture, even if it's not in the design spec. Consider it, because we have to have it, because we need to adopt technology, and we need the money from the front to the back side to go move to the front side so we can do it. So I joke, right, a little 8-track joke. Obsolescence is crushing us. It is absolutely crushing us. People think it's just a small thing, right? And if you go amongst the PMs, they have a UFOR list a mile long, and you wouldn't believe how many of those things are obsolescence issues. 9 out of 10 systems that enter LRIP already have obsolescence involved. It's a huge problem, and it's crushing us. And I don't absolutely have an answer, but what I know is that $100 design decision of source of supply on the front side, whether it's a microprocessor, or a chip, is costing us, millions, if not tens of millions, on the back side to do a redesign or do a lifetime buy and get us through the next evolution. And we, this community, we have to get ahead of it. And I think part of it lies in really embracing modularity so that we can do plug and play, and also, figuring out more efficient systems of certification, of new systems as we spiral up. It's a huge problem, and it's incredibly costly. And when we have to address these design decisions that occurred early on, and it's failing us to fielding new equipment, we're failing. We as a community are probably doing something wrong, and we need to get out front of that conversation very, very early on in the life cycle. So, man, it's just bad news today, aren't I? It's not my intention. We'll get there. So, back to the historical perspective. We've never guessed the next war we're going to. We've never figured it out right. Like, we didn't know we were going to World II. We didn't really know we're going to the jungles of Vietnam, but we caught up. We built all this tanks and planes and gear to fight the communist hordes coming through the Fulda Gap, and that never really materialized. We have spent the last 13 years fighting asymmetric insurgents, and we've done very good developing systems of ISR and monitoring their cell phones and doing all the stuff we need to do to keep our soldiers safe. Is that who we're going to be fighting next? I don't know. I don't think anybody really truly knows. We can guess. So when I say that, before we invest too hard in a product, we have to invest hard in the technology that allows us to be flexible and adaptable, right? We can't afford to go all in on a product line and then it changes us down the road. So I want you all to take in this quote. So Miss Mary Miller, the DASA for R&T, this is a quote from her testimony in the House Armed Services Committee back in February. We're seeing technology evolving at an exponential rate. Our enemy's access to the advanced technology has closed the gap in our overmatch. So remember what we were saying early on, right? We said, never again. We're going to figure this thing out. We're going to stay 30, 40 years in the hand-to-head time. Well, we're fighting folks in Syria right now that have advanced weapon systems, non-state actors that have weapon systems that 5 years ago didn't exist. Before JSF ever hit its first run, there was something that looked a lot like it sitting on a runway in Beijing, right? We have gone from a 30-year technological overmatch to something that looks between 3 and 7 years. Whew. Okay, so we can either continue to chase that wheel, or we can shift focus and pivot and take advantage of that exponential technology growth, right? We're never going to stop the internet. We're not going to stop the access of information. We're certainly not going to stop folks from innovating to solve problems, whether they're us or they're our adversaries. They're going to find new and innovative ways to use this cool new technology, and cost of manufacturing is becoming cheaper, and more off-the-shelf methods are available, and design is becoming a lot easier. So how do we get through this? Well, this is where we turn the tone a little bit, and we go positive, right? So I personally believe, and this is the cool thing about writing your own slides, you get to make up your own quotes and put them up there like it's a thing. So I believe we can retain the technological edge in the future by developing tools and processes to adapt manufacturing more rapidly than our adversaries. So not focusing on the kit, but the methods of rolling this in. We have some great weapon systems out there, no doubt. How long has it taken us to upgrade them? How long has it just taken us to unlock them and get the software and IP issues and fussing through this and that and the money and the dollar and the time associated to adopt this new technology? By the time we're getting to adopt the thing we were trying to do 3 years ago, we're blowing through. And this is exponential, y'all. This is not, it's not a linear growth. This is exponential. And I think the answer is figuring out ways to manufacture these things and qualify them on the front side and bring them in. I think that's the answer. I do. So I have this idea, right? And this is just my dream. And I hope you come along with me for a second because I think there's a lesson to learn here. Either that I'm just way too far out there and I should listen to my daughter, or I think we can come to a solution in the future. So how do we take complex manufacturing, whether it's additive, it's adaptive, it's subtractive, it's CNC, it's design, how do we take all these things and put it into a box and push it forward so that our soldiers can manufacture on the fly? And why would we do that, right? I mean, we're talking, there was a study by the U.S. Army Innovation, what was it? Anyway, sorry, I screwed up. 2015 study that said additive manufacturing and some of these advanced manufacturing cost between 3 and 28 times conventional manufacturing. And I heard somebody say yesterday, beautifully, if you can mill it, just mill it, right? I mean, there's no reason to shove a square peg in a round hole and manufacture it by a cool, new, fancy means just to do it, right? So why would we do this? So here's just a little vignette and war story. So I was a maintenance company commander for Black Hawk Battalion, 30 Black Hawks, and we flew 22,000 hours that year. As far as I know, we still have the record. I can't really find anybody that has data to back it up or not, so I'm just going to stick with it. We still have the record. And the amount of material that we poured through that year was just insane. We were doing full phases every 4 days with a workforce of about 200 folks. And what always amazed me is I'd step out back at my tech supply, and mill vans upon mill vans rolling back. Thousands and thousands and thousands of line numbers of parts. Any one of those stupid bins empty could mean that we weren't flying. That's crazy, right? I mean, any nut, washer, bolt, whatever, any one of those items, why couldn't I print a non-flight critical part? Maybe not print, let's not use the word print, let's say manufacture, forward, right? So what is this vision that I have, this trip I'm asking you to come along on? This is taking all those technologies, but also developing the processes for qualification and having those brutal conversations with government and getting us online for qualification. And oh, by the way, we want to get rid of the supply line completely, so we need some help recycling. And then we also need to be dummy-proof, right? We need an 18, 19-year-old soldier to be able to push a button based on a file number. That's what we need, right? And we need it to be able to rock back and forth on a vehicle, drive through, whatever, and 100% humidity, minus 40, whatever it is, that's what we need. So, y'all feel the vision a little bit? Okay, so why? Why would we do that if it's that much more expensive? Because we're willing to pay for capability if it brings it forward, right? We're willing to do that. The first point that I'd like to make is that this is coming no matter what, right? So once we start doing these novel geometries and these very intricate parts, we now took away some of those first 2 points that I asked your help on, repairability and maintainability. I can't repair that. I can't spot weld, a titanium thing that looks like that. I can't repair that. So now you were just saying, hey, we haven't really fixed the problem of the supply line issue. Well, you're still asking, the logistics folks to maintain that supply line. All right, so I'd like to do this forward. Can we do it forward? Can we get there? 5, 10, 15, 20 years? I hope so. Shipping is expensive. Yeah, I got that. I'm not trying to be glib. But this is both in blood and treasure, right? So to give you an idea, just magnitude, last 13 years of war, GAO deployed $1.6 trillion it cost. An enormous amount of that is maintaining our supply lines. Enormous amount of the blood of our fallen nation men and women is because of securing those supply lines. So $1.6 trillion for the entire war, a huge portion that the numbers are all over the map, between 30 and 40, 50% of that is shipping stuff across. Whether it's, getting pilfered in Pakistan as they, hit it with an arc welder, rip open a shipping crate and pilfer 40%, shove it back with rocks, and then it goes back. Or, we're trying to secure the supply lines across Afghanistan or Iraq, and we're targets. It's really hard to secure a 200-mile road. It's just hard. And it takes a lot of energy and blood and treasure to do that. And if we can even make a dent in that through manufacturing, pushing it forward, I think it's the right way to go. And that's assuming we have roads. What if we had gotten embroiled in Darfur a couple years ago? What if we had gotten embroiled in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there is no roads, there is no infrastructure to support our logistics? Are we really going to build 1,000 miles of paved roads? I don't think we can do that. So how do we get in front of this? It's a big problem. And I believe that finding a way to push manufacturing forward to our soldiers as far forward as we can could eliminate this and give us some of that leverage and some of that treasure back. So let's go back to that one point. So let's see. If I saw a number, it was $400 to ship every 6 pounds to get it delivered to the front. It takes 5 gallons of gas to deliver every one, right? Kind of start adding that up, Even just the retrograde out of Afghanistan, pulling that equipment back home. This is all the stuff we don't need, but we need to get it out of the country. This estimate's between 1.6 and $5 billion. Can you imagine if we just had a fraction of that back to pump into S&T and to pump into development of our manufacturing? Can you imagine what we could do, which is a fraction of getting that back? So I threw the gauntlet down. I'd love to see some innovative, thoughtful discussion on it after this, because I'm up here to big target on my chest after this. I'd love to just hear your thoughts. Our warfighters deserve it, right? They deserve to have the intellectual backing of this community, and we have serious problems that we need to solve. And they're not getting better, they're getting worse. And we need to come together as a community and figure this out. And I believe that going back to the model of Germany again, when we came out of that war and we saw what technology required, what technology did on the battlefield for our adversary, we said never again. And we're kind of getting to that point, not because we rested on our laurels, but because of communication and because of access to information. The game has kind of changed again. And are we going to keep our head in the sand and ignore the elephant in the room, or are we going to acknowledge and use it as leverage and an opportunity to push forth the next 30, 40 years? If we keep doing what we're doing, we will keep getting what we get. And the estimation is we have technological overmatch by 2050. So I'm not willing to accept that. Are you? No. So I need your help, and I think you all are it. You all are the linchpin. You are the absolute, you're the most important thing we got going, I think, right now. I think all the technology in the world doesn't matter if we can't do it affordable and push it to the field in a way that changes the game. And there's a lot of great stuff out there that we need to get to the warfighter, and we need your help getting it there. So thank you so much for all you do. Appreciate you. Thank you. So with that, I'll open it up to questions or comments or just discussion.
What are you doing in the area of cybersecurity?
So that's a great question. right? So, I'm sorry, what are you doing in the area of cybersecurity? So we're at an interesting crossroads, I think. If you look at the capital investment of industry versus the DoD, it's a fraction of what we're doing. And we as specifically MRDEC, as part of the material enterprise, we are doing the best we can to follow the guidance from DoD and Army for cyber. But policy doesn't act itself, right? So we have to come up with our own material solutions. And as we advance, for instance, aviation is a great example. Aviation, Blackhawks, Apaches, whatnot. Over the last 20 years, we've basically bolted on new technology. Nothing's been networked, and we're going to networking. And now we're going, wow, how do we do this? So there's been a huge investment in being able to find vulnerabilities and move forward and fix that for our commodity areas. Now, what that's also flushed out is we have a lot of opportunity to help out our partners in training. We have 8 pillars in our cyber center or cyber engineering center, and that's just one of them. And there's also IA and whatnot. But mostly for us, we're doing it to protect our own systems. And we could use all the help we can get, and obviously it's a big problem for industry as well and academia. All of our data is at risk if we don't secure it. But it's not just about the data portion, right? I mean, it's about the microelectronic portion. That supply chain, I would venture to guess that if we cracked open most of the boxes that we have in our equipment right now, their source of supply is not somebody we're really excited about. And we have to get ahead of that. And either that's through assessment or that's through, finding protection technology. Did I answer your question? Sir. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Good morning, and a wonderful keynote. Thank you.
Oh, good morning.
I've observed through over the past several years efforts in NAVAIR and other agencies to trying to develop a forward capability. I've also observed a lot of parochial thinking using traditional manufacturing as the only means to do something. And of course, we're here because we know differently. There are other ways.
Right.
But it's not just one piece. It's many pieces. A very complex system of authorities and regulatory, both with what people know and what they don't know, yes, that are probably obstacles to achieve the objective that you've laid out. So it's a kind of you have to boil the whole ocean at once to get it to happen. And
right.
I guess really 30 years is a pretty short time. And while there's been some progress, probably not nearly enough that has to be done to do what you want to do. Technology's still a barrier. Having the right technology that you can take forward and weld a titanium part or a part that was on a B-52 or whatever it is.
Right.
Back in 1990, I met a gentleman from Boeing who seen what we were doing and said, if we could replace a B-52 part, we'd be really on top of things. We're not any closer to do that as we were, that long ago, and
right.
that's pretty scary. So, when I've been to NAVSEA as an example, talking about moving a technology onto a boat or moving it forward someplace, there's a lot of obstacles, and they talk only about obstacles. They don't talk about how we're going to get over them. And it's like, man, that's scary. We're here talking about, moving the needle really far forward, yet we see all the reasons why we can't.
Right.
So how do you overcome that inside
How do you come out?
as well as outside?
I'd love to hear the answer for that from the group. But I would say, simply, like so many of our problems we have is really through conversation, right? I mean, so when I was teaching chemistry, and this is a terrible example, but I'm good at this road anyway. When I was teaching chemistry, I just realized that scientific literacy, there's just a lack of scientific literacy. And so how do you solve problems as a society when the people that are winning the war on messages just have a better BD, better business development than you, right? So if the fundamental education isn't there, whoever has the best message wins. So I think we, especially in the green suit side, we need to do better at educating ourselves on the art of the possible. And we're so focused on on the short-term fight, right? I mean, we've done a phenomenal job with weapon systems to overcome non-state actors right now. But what else have we left on the table? And I think I really believe that conversation is the key. I know that's so nebulous, but I mean, getting in the door and having that conversation with not just the decision makers, but the stakeholders that may be your barriers to progress, and it's education. How do you do that? I don't know. God, that's a great question. Does anybody have a solution to that? So I mean, how do we communicate effectively to get off dead center for pushing the needle far to the right?
Yeah, well, I think
sorry.
in response to that also is, and sometimes we're our own worst enemy, right? And so, for instance, what can we be doing to improve and accelerate and remove the barriers for our defense acquisition system? I mean, how can we get that to be more effective and more efficient, and not as, to be able to achieve what you're talking about is to get out of our own way sometimes.
No, you're right. Well, and so the good news is, and we'll see what comes of it, but there's Chief of Staff of the Army is really dug into his authority for acquisition reform, and we'll see what that comes to, but at least the conversation is shedding a lot of light on some of these speed bumps and processes that a lot of it is staffing and not statutory but regulatory stuff that we could be smarter in enacting. And I hope that that's what comes out of this whole conversation. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
To your response and Ralph's response, I would suggest that on legacy systems, it's more difficult to bring innovation in. But I think I was wondering about your thoughts on future vertical lift. I think there are folks here who traditionally support other manufacturing efforts. And since we're a little further from Huntsville than others, is there some engagement opportunities through MRDEC and NDIA efforts down there that we should be aware of so that we could help show you how we bring supply chain innovation, whether it be through additive manufacturing or helping small businesses? But I would think that emerging program is ripe for opportunity for new players in
Absolutely.
the game, if you would allow us. So any recommendations on how we engage MRDEC on future vertical lift opportunities?
Sure. So there's within the MRDEC, there's the Aviation Development Directorate, and they do regularly have, I think, quarterly or biannually, they have industry days or whatnot, and maybe we need to use NCDMM as a place to at least communicate that's occurring. Obviously there's restrictions of how we get it out there to make sure there's fair and open competition and whatnot, but maybe there's better opportunities for us to communicate to y'all. I'll take that back. It's a good point. Because there are opportunities, obviously. So thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Understand you guys may be moving forward on a center of excellence that focuses on certification and qualification virtually. Kind of what I'm hearing coming out of you guys down there. Can you talk to that, on that remit?
So specifically for aviation, or in general?
However you want to.
So
Are you doing that? Can you verify the remit on that or deny
I
the
would
remit?
say that the community of practice down there, with NASA and some of our academic partners and whatnot, it's definitely something we're working with. I think that the largest hurdle right now is the aerospace portion of it. One thing we are leveraging heavily is down at Corpus Christi, some of the repair techniques. We're getting a lot of really good validation out of the repair cold spray technology and whatnot as kind of those early steps to validating and certifying for airworthiness. And so I think once we can kind of transfer that and scale it up to other techniques, I mean, there's definitely a path there. And we've been we know we have had and reviewed the NASA aerospace qualification plans and whatnot, that we have to understand, we have to better understand as a community how we get there. But it is definitely in the conversation. As for how far we've gone, ma'am, I don't know. I can get back to you on that.
Hi, Charlie Covert with UPS. Is it on? Okay. So the question I have is back on the acquisition. I know that some leaders from the Pentagon were out in Silicon Valley talking about how the process could be reformed to help define an objective rather than defining an RFP that has to be adhered to the letter. So with an RFP process like that, you're more or less just taking some cost out of an existing process as opposed to breaking the new process. So I was curious, are you aware of any breakthroughs that came through those levels of conversation, or what types of acquisition reform might be on the table?
You know, I think it's so early, at least on the Army side. I think it's so early. We don't know what it looks like. I think we're still fact finding and trying to frame the problem. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, so you're talking about like a scope of objectives as opposed to a scope of work. And I know that we have the flexibility to do that, and it's just a matter of what's in vogue at the moment. And then the program managers have flexibility to adjust from there. Anything else? Yes, sir.
To that point, to your point, is there more flexibility forward than there is here? So if if you have something forward, is there more leeway on getting something done no matter what in the field?
Well, so that's a great kind of pivot point, right? There's a difference between the program of record, right, which requires the very deliberate statutory milestone A, B, C, the whole acquisition life cycle, and then there's just fielding equipment, right, that doesn't necessarily have for either a JUONS or an ONS or whatnot. They're very different, and I think it's important to just delineate which one we're talking about. Are you referring to the formal acquisition program of record, or fielding?
I think I'm talking fielding, but
Okay.
If you have a forward base that has a capability to manufacture, whatever that is,
Right.
it's likely that those who are on site will use that and not wait for the bus. If they have a JUON, if they have something really urgent that has to get done, without risk of life, they'll
Right.
do what they have to do. So
Sure.
it's a mindset change, I would think.
We haven't certified duct tape, right?
Right, and that's a great point, right? If it is amazing what capability soldiers find out of the most mundane stuff. So, what a capability like that would offer beyond the imaginable, I don't know. That's a great point. I mean, it's like crowdsourcing ideas, right? I mean, they could.
Well, to the point, their application to the point of conversation, they're application focused.
Right.
They have a job to get done. They got to get that aircraft up.
Absolutely.
Period. End of story. They're not worried about somebody who has an engineering degree saying, "Hey, it doesn't follow the standard. Get it up."
Well,
I mean, to the point where
so
it doesn't fail.
What I would say is specifically in aviation, we do, right? So that's the thing, is in other commodity areas, you can just kind of wing it, right? I mean, so beginning of the Iraq War, and IEDs started becoming prolific, there was no rule to say that we couldn't go and buy a piece of, 1-inch rolled steel and shove it on as a door. There was nothing to say that. In aviation, there's very many things that say I can't do that. So we do really care what the engineering community has to say, through our Airworthiness Directorate. So, I mean, it's almost like you have to treat it as two separate conversations, I think. That's a good point. I appreciate the question. It's a great conversation. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So I've got one. One of the challenges you laid out at the beginning of your conversation, I think, is a common challenge for most organizations, and that is that you're so busy just trying to keep things running. It's hard to think about the future. It's hard to figure out what to do next. But you've got a vision for that. You're thinking about what comes down the road. So my question is, How do you innovate in the Army? Is there a team? Is there a process? How do you take that step back and innovate something that might help you down the road?
So real quick, to clarify, when you say you, are you saying the proverbial you, or? That's a great question. And I mean, I think we have so much intellectual capital, throughout the enterprise. It's just a matter of, like you said early on, sort of, just connecting the dots. I mean, the opportunities like this is how you really innovate, is to connect those dots of opportunity and expertise and vision, right? Because I mean, vision is nothing without the other two, right? I don't know. It's a really nebulous answer, but I hope it fit the bill. Okay. All right. Anything else? Yes, sir.
With moving manufacturing forward to the point of use, what are some of the challenges or vulnerabilities do you think that introduces into the process and the supply chain, vis-a-vis intellectual properties, securing that particular area that has the intellectual property and the ability to manufacture those components, either in part or in whole, and how does that factor into the equation of moving this process forward?
I mean, any answer I'd give you is on the fly, but what I would say is actually, I think we're working through that now, right? I mean, people are sending, copyrighted and trademarked and patented information over Gmail, right, to each other to be manufactured. So I think as industry starts wrapping their head around how y'all protect that IP just, via open internet, I think we start learning how to do that on the defense side too. Does that seem like a reasonable? Because I mean, how is everyone doing it now? I mean, I understand that we're just kind of sending files over.
I think the concern would be thinking this process forward, putting additive manufacturing in the field where instant manufacturing on the fly, you've got designs, you've got total complete product development. If that particular unit falls under fire, becomes secured by an enemy, they now have a fast track to the intellectual property of specifically of weapons, components thereof, that could be a game changer and take away some of the technology edge that we would have in the field if you take that technology forward.
That's a great point. No, I mean, we would have to secure it like we do any of our classified equipment, and have a destruction plan, and anti-tamper would be a huge portion of that, and that's something that we are very, very aggressively realizing that we need to pursue better, is the anti-tamper portion of it. I mean, we want to, to that point, there's a story you can tell, right? 20 years ago, if an adversary wanted one of our weapon systems, they had to get it, either through espionage or shoot it down. And now, because of foreign military sales, many of our allies and partner nations have our capability, but we don't want to give them our technology. So how do we protect that technology? I would say that it falls in the same boat, the same challenges that we have in those systems. It's a really good point, though. I mean, and these are exactly the kind of conversations we have to do to just get there, right? To even just socialize it and whatnot. And this is just my vision, y'all. This isn't necessarily, endorsed by anybody or whatnot, but I think it's at least, I meant it to be just a conversation piece to kind of start that conversation that if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we get, and that's unacceptable. Yes, ma'am.
I kind of wanted to keep going on that line of intellectual property and
Sure.
kind of bring it back home to what you mentioned just at first, IP and profit, especially for some of the more, the entire industry base that's supporting our defense systems. The really key challenge that's kind of rough and hard to get through is that intellectual property ownership.
Sure.
And the licensing of the capabilities out to a forward base, or the details behind all of that contracting and business that has to go on in the acquisition process. So I didn't know if you had something.
I didn't say it was easy.
No. I know, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we have a war game going on next week, which is going to probe that exact problem and how the business models are actually represented on both the industry side and the government side in that acquisition process for a maintenance and sustainment sort of an activity. So you need to replace a part in 2 weeks. and you want to have the OEM manufacturer involved, how do you do all of that business paperwork to get that approved and all that? It's going to be at the Lockheed Center, right, in Lighthouse, Suffolk,
Okay.
next week. Yeah. Right, America Makes and
Oh, very
several
cool.
of
Okay.
the industry and government partners are participating. It's got over 80 participants contracting financial folks, not engineers,
That's great.
going through this whole process. So it's great. The couple things that I wondered if you had any success stories around are negotiations around liability when those parts are fabricated in the field, or potentially the quality control issues and the insurance that you've actually created a part that is compliant with the original.
No. Right, those are the challenges that we got to figure out. You know, and what does that look like? I don't know that anybody is necessarily doing that. You know, and it's a very different conversation whether you're printing a belt buckle for a soldier or you're printing a, you know, variable guide inlet for an engine or something. You know, totally different conversation. So I don't, you know, no. I think the answer is no. We don't, and something we got to work through. That's all great points, though. God, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I say this from a metrologist. When we push the manufacturing forward, we can't forget to push the metrology forward too, the measurements.
Yes.
So they're going to go hand in hand. So if we have a 3D printer, right next to it has to be a tool to be able to measure it and qualify it.
And I would say not right next to it, but integrated.
Oh.
In situ, while it's occurring. Right? Well, I mean, baby steps, right? No, and metrology is obviously an important key portion of this. Is how do we measure effectively? I mean, do we keep going down the road of, you know, acceptable tolerances, or do we actually print and manufacture to a specific shape, form factor for a specific piece of equipment? Do you know what I mean? No. What's that? Well, let's say that we could lower them, right? Because if I buy from two vendors and one's on the high end of the tolerance, one's on the low 10, I mean, you know how that works out. So what if at the point of use we could measure the thing that needs to be repaired, and we could have exactly, you know, what we need, and we could adjust those tolerances for the actual item it's going to be used on, right? Metrology would be a huge portion of that. Good point. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Colonel. Back in 2007, 2008 timeframe, I had the opportunity to work at the MRAP Joint Program Office, where our group was pushing out enhanced survivability technologies at that time. Now, my adversary, developing some nasty anti-armor stuff, developing it and fielding it, and they didn't have to go through GSA, they didn't have to do the FARs and the DFARs and other processes. Right. Now, on our end, we had a DX rating. We had the backing of OSD, the Secretary of the Navy, Secretary of the Army. We were pushing as fast as we could for our program. You know, obviously the other programs had to compete with us, but you know, it really would have been nice to have some of the advanced manufacturing technologies that we're talking about at that time. I mean, since in that 8 years since. Of course, the downside is my adversary has those as well. Could you talk a little bit about, is there a concern about them getting inside of our OODA loop and being able, adversaries, being able to use advanced technologies? And then secondly, has the Army really looked at the operational impacts of having an adversary that could turn around things quicker than we can, and because of slowness of our business processes?
I couldn't speak to that. I wish I could. I think I know the answer, but I would only be guessing. Have we looked at it? I don't know. I hope somebody is, because I mean, what I will tell you is that if you go on, I know that you go on the dark web and even open source. I mean, you can get 3D printing plans for all sorts of very interesting things, and it's not hard to at a low cost and no statutory or regulatory requirements. They can just print it, field it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's a challenge. I mean, to your point, sir, I mean, we can't get out of our own way sometimes. But we need to try, right? Anything else? I truly appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And thank you for all you do. Thank you.